Bueno, pasamos ahora a la última charla. Nos va a hablar Stephen Attenborough. Stephen vino desde Londres, es el vicepresidente comercial de Virgin Galactic y bueno, el escenario, the stage is yours, Stephen.
Blasting tourists into space may soon no longer be the stuff of science fiction.
Galactic says it could start commercial space flights as early as next year.
3, 2, 1. Armed. Fire. Charlie, 8 seconds. Beautiful black sky. Amazing view. You are incredible.
Good evening, everybody. Hello, hello. So I had 2 New Year's resolutions this year. One was to not drink any alcohol during January, and the second one was to be in bed every night by 10 o'clock. And then I came to Uruguay. I spent today at the Garzon winery, which was amazing, but was just being pushed wine for a lunch which didn't end until 5 o'clock. And I have probably done maybe more than 100 conferences from Norway to New Zealand, and I have never got on stage at 10 o'clock. So Uruguay has a world record for me tonight, and I will try and keep awake, and I hope you will too. And maybe it shouldn't have come as a surprise, because my journey to Uruguay started about a year ago, actually, and I got a call from Necker Island, from Richard Branson, my boss, and he said, look, we've got a group of South American, Latin American CEOs, business leaders coming down to the island for a few days to learn about the Virgin brand, and could you come down and speak to them? And I thought, you don't say no to Richard Branson, and I always like an invitation to Necker Island, so I said yes, of course. And I didn't really think too much about it, but I thought it might be a little bit dry. There's just business people, and we've got to talk about the Virgin brand, and hopefully it'll be fun. And I have to say, it was the most fun 4 days of my life. You guys, and some of you are here in the room. You parted like it was, 1999 or whatever it is, and you were dancing on the tables, you were up until the sun came up. So when somebody said, do you want to come down to Uruguay to talk about Virgin Galactic, I said, absolutely. And I've had a great time so far, so thank you for that. So, and I'm here as well because I've got a very exciting thing to tell you, because we are at the dawn of a new space age. It's going to be a space age which is characterized by reusable space vehicles which are owned and operated by private companies like Virgin Galactic. And those vehicles and those companies and this new space age are going to transform your business and personal lives. And things are happening fast. Things are happening at Virgin Galactic fast as well. This was a slide that I used for many years to start off talking about this incredible journey, the Virgin Galactic journey. And, it's a nice little play on words. It says space is virgin territory, which is sort of funny. And it's a lovely picture of our spaceship, which I'll talk a lot more about in a moment. But it's clearly, the spaceship is very clearly on the ground. It's not in space. And all that changed just over a year ago. And that's when things started to get really exciting at Virgin. And it meant that I could now use this slide, which is space really is virgin territory, because Virgin Galactic became the company which owned and operated the first crewed vehicle built for commercial service. That means a vehicle to take you and me into space, to put humans into space. That happened in December of 2018. And it was the first crewed space launch from US soil since 2011. And, as a British brand, we were sort of proud of that. So that was very big. And a lot of celebrations happened after that. So our pilots got their commercial astronaut wings. That's from the Secretary of State for Transportation in the United States. The rocket motor that we used for that historic flight is now sitting in the Smithsonian Museum in DC. If you're ever up there, you can have a look at it. And we looked at the vehicle, we talked to the pilots, we looked at all the data. You know, that space flight was historic and it went very, very well. So about 10 weeks later, in February of last year, we did it again. We went a bit higher, we went a bit faster. And if you can make out this photograph, which is a little bit hard to make out, you've got two pilots there, one sort of facing forward, one looking out of the window, and then you've got a third person. So for the first time, and this again was never been done before with a commercial spaceship, we went to space and we put somebody in the back. That person worked for us, and I think the most exciting thing was that person was a she. So, space is for everybody, but particularly for lots more women. So that was another huge day. And we broke a lot of records during that day. We actually created the first Scottish astronaut, believe it or not. That is not him. But we did find in California, in the Mojave Desert, where we do our flights, one Scottish piper. So he played as Dave Mackay, our first Scottish astronaut, returned from that successful flight. So it was a really, really big day. But what I wanted to do, having sort of gone through that, we did some other things last year as well, actually. We showed the spacesuits that you're going to wear to space when you come with us. We also became the first publicly listed human spaceflight company on the New York Stock Exchange. So it was a big year. But let me just take you back, because my story at Virgin Galactic was right at the start. I happened to be the first employee of this amazing company. So 2004, I was doing something completely different. I bumped into somebody who said, you should go and come and talk to us about this new project. And I found myself knocking on the door in London of Richard Branson's house for, I guess it was an interview. It was sort of a cup of tea and a chat. And I had read through his autobiography a little bit before I went for that meeting. And there was a story in there which I thought was sort of maybe pertinent to this new space company he was talking about. And it related to when he was talking to a conference, a bit like this somewhere in the world. And it came to the questions at the end, and there was a very eager young man in the front row who put up his hand, and Richard said, yeah, how can I help you? And he said, Richard, I don't really care how I do it, I just want to be rich. And he said, so just tell me, how do I become a millionaire? And Richard said, that's really, really easy. He said, all you need to do is to become a billionaire and then start an airline. And so when I thought about that story, I thought, if that's the case for airlines, goodness knows why he wants to go to space, because I'm pretty sure that's going to be even harder and more exciting, more expensive, I was going to say, than starting an airline. So I talked to him about this, and I remember very well what he said. And he said, look, Virgin is a very unusual brand. It's not defined to one particular product or one service or one sector. We do lots of different things. And the reason that we do these things is always the same. It's where we find sectors or companies that have become lazy or complacent, they've failed to innovate, and they are not keeping their customers happy. And if we like that sector or that industry, we go in with a set of values, we shake it up, or we try to shake it up, and we try to do it differently. Sometimes we do it very well, sometimes it doesn't work. That's what being a business person is about, being an entrepreneur is about. So I said, that sounds great, I completely understand it. And I said, so how does that relate to space travel? And he said, well, I can remember the moon landings of 1969, sitting with my mum and dad at home in England, and I was so excited about that amazing achievement. And my mum and dad said to me in 1969, they said, by 1985, everybody will be going to space. And it hasn't happened. And he said, I think I'm not alone in this sort of disappointment and this longing to just see what is beyond the blue sky. And he was right, and I go around the world and I talk about space travel, human space travel, and there is a universal fascination with human spaceflight. I think it attracts something deep inside, our desire to explore, to discover, to see what lies over the horizon. And I can probably demonstrate it here tonight. I mean, it always works, so please don't be the one country where it doesn't work. So if there was a free ticket up here tonight, and you were pretty sure you were going to come back safely, how many people in this room would like to experience space travel for themselves? It's really bright lights, but I would say just about everybody. There'd be some people that say no way, but generally speaking, people want to do it. So thank you for that. And there's so much more evidence that there's this fascination. He said, so if I want to go, I'm pretty sure lots of other people do. And we've been able to go to space with people since the beginning of the 60s. And they all come back not talking about their experience for a week or a month or even a year. They talk about it for the rest of their lives. It's transformational in a very positive way. So you would think something so important, something so cool, and something we've been doing for 50 or 60 years, you would think that a lot of people had gone. Have they? No, they have not. So of a population of 7 or 8 billion people, a grand total of 573 people have been to space, and 5 of those work for Virgin Galactic. So we've got a long way to go. So there's definitely here an area that is ripe for disruption. People are not being made happy by the space industry that government agencies have been running. It's time for a change. So I said, that's amazing. And then he said, but there's something else. Because what we also try to do with all Virgin companies is not just disrupt in a positive way, but we also try to disrupt businesses with a real sense of purpose. And he said, and space is just a great example, because we all know in this room, we're having a great time down here. Life is good in many ways, but we know that underlying all that fun, there are some big global challenges that are not going to go away. And unfortunately, there is no silver bullet, but what we do know is that space matters. And I'll give you a little analogy that actually Jeff Bezos, who's one of our competitors, but it tells a story, but it's a good story, so I'll repeat it. And he said, when he started Amazon, he had an idea. And he decided to execute that idea. And in order to do that, he did not have to invent the internet. He didn't have to invent online payments. He didn't have to invent logistics. Though that infrastructure was in place, he just needed to put his idea on top of it. If you're an entrepreneur thinking about doing something in space, and there's so much that we can do in space, believe you me, it's going to be very difficult to implement that idea, because getting to space, access to space, is really, really hard. And that is why so few people have been. But we know how important space is. The way that we navigate, the way that we communicate, the way that we manage natural disasters, the way we do so many things has been immeasurably improved by the access that we've had to space in the last 50 or 60 years. So if we can transform that access, make it more regular, make it more affordable, make it clean, and make it accessible to just about everybody, imagine what we can do. So that is our sense of purpose. And we sum that up as together, we're going to open space, because at the moment it's pretty closed, and we're going to do that to try and change the world for good. And that's what everybody at Virgin Galactic and all our stakeholders and partners, customers believe in, and that's why they're part of that story. And I want to talk a little bit about what happened next, if you like. So having established that there was an industry ripe for disruption, that it had a real good sense of purpose, we have this thing at Virgin which is called screw it, let's do it. It's when you don't know everything, but you know enough to give it a go. And that's exactly what we did with Virgin Galactic in 2004. And so what did we do next? Well, the thing that I did when I first came was to think about this together element, because space is hard. A lot of people say to me, what is the defining factor of your 15 or 16 years with Virgin Galactic? And I say it has been really hard. Everything you do with human spaceflight is a little bit harder than you think it's going to be, and we have to get it right. And so you don't do that in a silo. And one of the things that I have found in this business is that when you set off on purposeful, challenging journeys and businesses, and you tell the story, warts and all, then amazing people join your journey. People who, just make it immeasurably easier and really help you get across the line. Let me give you a couple of examples of that. We decided, can I go back one, please? We decided right at the beginning that we needed to find some customers. Because there is a real danger when you're doing something like this, you get so caught up in the interest and the excitement of space travel, you forget that it's actually about customers. And so you need to know that they share your sense of excitement, and that they want to be disrupted in the way that you want to disrupt them. And so we went out without much at all, really. We said, look, we don't know how much this, or when this product is going to be available. We don't know what the experience is going to be like. We don't know where we're going to fly from. We don't know what the spaceship is going to be like. But look, if we can get there, and you want to be with us on one of the first flights, could you send us a check for $200,000? You know, and unbelievably in some ways, a lot of people did that. And one of the things that I have learned is that, you know, bringing customers into a business very early on is an incredibly good idea. Bringing them into the tent, listening to what they have to say. They become your greatest ambassadors. They help you build a better business. And in our case, have formed a unique community of what we call our future astronauts. We have over 600 of them now who've paid between $200,000 and $250,000 up front. They come from 60 countries around the world. And interestingly, within that 60 countries is Uruguay. So you do have your first astronaut, but I'm not allowed to tell you who he or she is. We also actually have a future astronaut sitting here in the audience tonight, and again, I'm not allowed to tell you who he or she is. That's for me to know and you to find out. But they're here, and it's an amazing community. We play together, we network together. Some people even tattoo our logos on their arms. We celebrate solar eclipses. We have lunch with Stephen Hawking, or the late Stephen Hawking. And believe it or not, our partners at Land Rover have created an amazing Range Rover, which is the Astronaut Edition. It's got lots of things that are special to it to do with Virgin Galactic, and you can only buy one if you've bought a ticket to space. And they're selling well, actually. What about another sense of this togetherness? You know, we needed somewhere to fly from. And in 2005, Bill Richardson, the governor of New Mexico, came to us and said, look, we think we've got some pretty good things in New Mexico which would help your business take off in more ways than one. And he said, if you bring us your space line, I will build you a spaceport. And Richard said, well, you know, if you build me a spaceport, I will bring you a space line. And they shook hands on it. And just a few years later, out of the desert, this amazing building, designed by Fosterers and Partners, the world's first purpose-built commercial spaceport, was ready to be opened. And of course, we opened it, as we do with all things in the business, with a big celebration. And it's a truly beautiful place. And when I talk about what it's going to be like to fly with Virgin Galactic in a moment, I will talk a little bit more about that building, which is ready and waiting in southern New Mexico in the United States. So what about the opening space bit? That's what we're here really to learn about. You know, when we started Virgin Atlantic back in the 1980s, all Richard needed to do really was to find somebody who would lease him a Boeing 747. He needed to put the logo on the side. He needed just to make it a better consumer experience. And then he had a chance of making that airline a success. And it has been a success. And I must not forget to mention that life is about to get very good for anybody that regularly goes to London, because Virgin Atlantic is about to open a service from Sao Paulo to London Heathrow. So make sure you use that, because it's much better than British Airways. The other thing, so that's what we did with airlines. But we couldn't do that with spaceships. Because the spaceships which existed and had been taking people to space for the last 50 years or 50 or 60 years had really not changed much. And there's an interesting picture here of a rocket that took Yuri Gagarin to space in 1961, the first astronaut, and then a Soyuz rocket going to space in 2018, could be 2019. And you don't need to be a rocket science to recognize that those vehicles are not that different. One of them's got a red stripe round, and that's about it, I think. So, and the trouble with these vehicles is that they don't have a fantastic safety record. They're very expensive, mainly because you throw everything away after you've used them. And they're just not the customer experience that you'd want to offer, or the levels of safety or commercial viability for a commercial space line. So we knew we had to find something different. I was talking to a Canadian astronaut the other day who came back from the space station in a Soyuz capsule, and he said it was a little bit like going over the edge of the Niagara Falls in a barrel, except that the barrel was on fire. And that's not something we could give to most of our customers. So we needed something different, and fortunately we found it. And this is a hard picture to follow, so don't worry too much about it. Can we go back one again? Sorry, I pressed the button twice. But the system we found, we we loved. It was built in prototype form, and it had lots of different things about it which gave it an elegance and gave it a fit-for-purposeness that we had not found elsewhere. And let me just give you two examples. The first one is, rather than launching a huge rocket from the ground, which is just a tower of fuel that you explode at ground level in order to provide the thrust to take you to space, with all the problems and issues that entails, our spaceship actually launches in the air. So we have an aircraft, very safe, very cheap, very reliable, which attaches itself to the spaceship and goes up to 50,000 feet and launches at that altitude. So you need a lot less energy in the spaceship to get you the rest of the way to space. That was one thing we loved, air launch. The other thing we really liked was how we got back from space into the Earth's atmosphere and back safely to Earth. Because that is a really hard part of space travel, because you're coming very fast from nothing into something. And sometimes the greatest innovations are the simplest ideas. And the idea that was come up with for getting back into the Earth's atmosphere with a vehicle that we could use hundreds, if not thousands of times, a reusable vehicle, came from the humble shuttlecock. I don't know what that word is in Spanish, but the thing you play badminton with. And if you throw a shuttlecock up to the ceiling here, even if it was upside down at the top of its trajectory, it would turn itself the right way and always come down round bit first. And obviously it would also come down much more slowly than a tennis ball, because it's got those feathers that produce drag. And so the designer of our spaceship thought, if I could make my spaceship into a shuttlecock in space where shape doesn't matter, then even if it came into the Earth's atmosphere upside down, it would right itself without a computer having to do that, or a pilot. And then it would also slow itself really, really dramatically in the upper atmosphere using the feathers. And for those of you, because it is a little confusing, those of you who are finding it difficult to work out how you make a spaceship into a shuttlecock, this is what it looks like. So this is our spaceship in what we call the feathered position. So the tail booms, or the wings, are rotated upwards, and they act as giant air brakes, or feathers, aerodynamic drag, as the spaceship comes back from space into the Earth's atmosphere. And we loved that design, and we decided to go with it. So we had to build two vehicles, and these are the vehicles that are going to take you to space, I hope, or some of you, in the years to come. So the first vehicle is that aeroplane that takes you in the spaceship up to 50,000 feet and launches you to go the rest of the way to space. It's the world's largest all-carbon composite aircraft in service. We call her Eve, after Richard Branson's mother, because she's a mothership. And you can see that she has a catamaran configuration, so two fuselages. The spaceship fits in the middle. And she has a unique heavy payload, high altitude capability. There's nothing like her in the world. She's been flown many, many times, completed her test flight program. The pilots love her. They say the only thing you have to remember when you pilot this plane is to get rid of years of training, which tells you always to land in the middle of the runway, because on this one, you have to land right over here, because you've got the other half of the aeroplane there. So that's the mothership. And this is your spaceship. So the spaceship is called Virgin Spaceship Unity. It's the world's first private crewed spacecraft built for commercial service. And this is the spaceship that I hope that many of you will board and will come to space with us in the future. So it looks a little bit like an executive jet, I guess, but it performs in a very different way. Everybody has a window seat, so you can see three windows along the side there. They're duplicated on the other side, so three on each side, two pilots at the front who will be flying your flight profile. So, when you buy a ticket with us, eventually you're going to get something through the post which says, okay, we're ready to fly you to space, and it'll tell you to turn up in New Mexico on a particular day. And for the first 3 days, we're going to train and prepare you for a journey of sensory overload. This is the interior of the spaceport that I was talking about. So this is where you're going to be working with the crew, working with the teams, as you get to really prepare yourself mentally and physically for this incredible journey. This is mission control. We're set up and we're ready to go out there in New Mexico. On day 4, once you've been fitted for your spacesuits, once you've had your last medical checks, when everything is good to go, on day 4, you're going to have to get up very early. So for everybody from Uruguay, that means an early night, I'm afraid, which is, I know is going to be tough, but just once. You're going to drive to the spaceport. It'll still be dark. You're going to get to the spaceport, go upstairs, get your last briefings, put your spacesuit on. You'll come down in the elevator to the astronaut walk here, which you can see. Your friends and family will be on either side. They'll be giving you a little hug and a kiss goodbye as you walk out of the door to a waiting car, which will take you to the end of the runway, where your spaceship will be waiting. So the pilots will be on board, the engines of the aircraft will be running, the spaceship will be fully fueled, its rocket motor will be fully fueled. You'll get strapped in, make sure you're comfortable, the door will shut, and then you'll just have a normal runway takeoff. And so to start off with, it's going to be pretty familiar. So as the sun rises over the New Mexico mountains, the spaceship attached to the aircraft will have a nice gentle takeoff. And for the first 45 minutes or so, you'll be climbing to 45 or between 45 and 50,000 feet. Now, that's going to be, a very gentle experience. My guess is that you're going to be rehearsing what you've been taught. Maybe you're going to be looking at a few pictures. Maybe you're going to be chatting to the crew. Maybe you're just going to be contemplating what's coming ahead. And one of the advantages I now have, because we had Beth, who is our chief astronaut trainer, in the back on our last space flight, is I've been able to take little photos of her face on each stage of the flight, just to give a little summary of how you may be feeling. So during this stage, she was feeling great. So she was smiling, she was having a good time, she's clearly looking forward to what's ahead, but nothing too dramatic. At about 45, 50,000 feet, when all the last checks have been completed with mission control, your pilots are going to turn around to you, and they're going to say, is everybody ready to go? Now, one of the things we will have trained you to do is to say yes. And so there'll be thumbs up, and the pilots will say, okay, here we go. And they'll press a button in the aircraft, and the spaceship will fall free of the aircraft and be its own vehicle. So you're going to get rid of the noise of the engines, which will be nice. There's going to be a little sinking feeling of your stomach, like going over the top of a roller coaster, but nothing too dramatic. And then, because we have wings, you're going to go into a nice glide for a few seconds. So the pilots will then say, oh, and that's what Beth looked like as she fell away. So it's, oh. Then the pilots are going to say, is everybody ready to go again? Everybody will say yes, and they'll say fire. And they'll press a button in the spaceship, and the rocket motor behind your head will fire up, and everything inside that cabin is going to change very, very dramatically. So from about 140 knots, your 0 to 60 time equivalent is about a second. You then keep accelerating to the speed of sound, and you reach that in less than 7 seconds. As you go through the speed of sound, the pilots will pull the nose into a vertical ascent, and you will keep accelerating at that rate until you're in excess of 3.5 times the speed of sound going straight upwards. If you're able to look out of the window at that stage, you'll see the sky turn from blue through to purple to black as you escape the Earth's atmosphere and head into space. The acceleration is just something to behold. There is a surge of energy which is smooth but very, very powerful, and we will have trained you how to cope with those G-forces. So it'll be thrilling, but you'll remain in the moment, and you'll remain calm, and you'll remain excited as your spaceship and you and your crew head to space. As soon as we've achieved enough velocity, what did Beth look like during that stage? That's a good face, isn't it? So as soon as the rocket motor has produced enough velocity, enough speed to get us into space, the pilots will turn that rocket motor off. And then something very dramatic happens, because having the noise and the vibration and the power of the acceleration, you're suddenly in the silence of space. There is no noise at all. There's no atmosphere outside the window. There's no noise inside the cabin. And from weighing 3.5 times what you normally weigh, you're going to weigh nothing at all. And at that stage, you'll be able just to turn the little button on the seatbelts. The seatbelts will float away. You'll put one finger on the corner of your seat, and you'll just float up into the cabin. And you have a few minutes in that just incredible freedom of weightlessness. Everything about our lives is governed by one G. You know, that's the reason we stay on the ground, the reason that we do everything the way we do. And to escape that even for a few minutes is just a magical experience by all accounts. But the real magic and the real high point of this trip, I believe, is when you float up to one of the big windows around the spaceship, you grab the side of it, and you look out. And this is, I think, the most exciting thing, because I say the astronauts that have experienced this did not go to space to look out of the window, but they did. And it's the view of the Earth from space which is what transforms them. And so to be able to offer that not just to professional astronauts, but to artists, to writers, to business people, to really people from all walks of life, we feel very excited about, because of the positive impact we believe will come from that experience. And that was Beth's immediate reaction the first time she looked out of the window. Beth has worked at NASA for many years. She's been speaking and knows astronauts inside out. And, you know, she'd been thinking about space for many, many years too. But she said nothing prepared her when she looked down at this jewel of a planet that we call planet Earth from the black sky of space. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So you spend a little time up there with a spaceship virtually suspended in the black sky, with you just looking down on this place that we call home. In the meantime, the pilots will be putting the wings into the feather position, as you can see there, ready for your homeward trip. You have a re-entry experience, which is pretty exciting. There's some lovely views there of the spaceship in space with in the feather position. About 70,000 feet, it goes back to an aircraft. You have a very dynamic flight from 70,000 feet to a smooth runway landing. You go back to see your loved ones. We award you your astronaut wings. You get more photographs and film that you know what to do with. And of course, being Virgin, we then have one hell of a party. So that is the space flight. But what is this all about, really? What about the changing the world for good bit? Well, I'd use this picture again. I mean, there's so many great pictures of people in space, and I've said it before, but I'll say it again. You know, this is a transformative experience. Almost without exception, astronauts come back and they talk about the beauty of our planet. They talk about looking at a planet without borders. They recognize that there is so much more that unites us than divides us as a human species. They come back recognizing that the atmosphere around the Earth is as thin as the peel of an apple. You know, when you're looking upwards on a day like today, which was beautiful, the blue sky seems to go on forever, and it's very difficult to imagine there's anything we could do, you know, to harm or affect that. When you look down from the perspective of space, you recognize that it is incredibly fragile. And I would say that overall, people come back with what you might call a planetary perspective, you know, and that, in our view anyway, is something that in the world we live in today is needed more than ever. So my challenge has always been not just to get people to space to have this experience, to have a transformational, meaningful experience, but to ensure that when they come back, we provide a platform for them to share that message with the world, and that is exactly what we intend to do. My final points, which seems to have gone dead, so never mind, is that we have a spaceship which can do other things for good. The first is that we can put science on board as well as people. And it's long been known that space is a great environment for science research of all types. It's just been very hard to get the science and the scientists up there, so we'll be doing that. And then the final really exciting thing, I think, particularly for people in this audience, is that if we can start to get experience, which we will, of taking normal people like you and me on vehicles which are going to fly very high and very fast. To start with, you're going to fly very high and very fast, and you're going to come back to where you started. But how about if we take that experience and take some of that technology and that learning and take off from one place and land in another? And that's what we call the future of point-to-point or transcontinental travel. And at least theoretically, it would mean that you could get from any point on the planet to any other point on the planet in about a couple of hours. So that means Uruguay to London Heathrow in 2 hours rather than 20. And that's good news for everybody here, I would imagine, and certainly for me as well. So that's what I wanted to tell you about this, and I can just show you the picture of that. That's the science, and that probably isn't going to be what the vehicle looks like, but the message is the same, that this is a first step. You know, it's an important first step to get more people to experience space, to have that transformation, but also helps us on that next step, to trying to make the world more connected and to bring communities together. I want to finish with a really nice film, and I think that will be it for this evening. We made this film after our first space flight that we did in December of 2018. We spoke to Richard afterwards and we said, what sort of film can we make for this? And he said, I'll tell you what we'll do. On my plane on the way back to Necker Island from this amazing day, I'm going to write a letter to my grandchildren that hopefully that they will read when they're older and they'll understand the significance of what happened today. So that's exactly what he did, and here's a chance to hear it. Thank you.
A letter to my grandchildren. My dad, your great-granddad, was an extraordinary man, full of wise words. He would often remind me that life is wonderful, and it is that simple truth which has driven me as I built businesses, raised my family, and embarked upon my many adventures. You are at the very start of life. It is an incredible gift, and it is there for the taking. It will deliver highs and lows, but by living it to the full, by always trying to do the right thing, and by keeping a childlike sense of adventure, it will indeed be wonderful. I used to think of space as a destination, but I now realize it's a journey with some amazing milestones along the way. Your lives will be transformed by space, and it will give your generation the planetary perspective on which the future of humanity rests. That we're all in this together, fellow travelers on Spaceship Earth. Today we pass the most significant of them all, as our beautiful VSS Unity, along with the hopes and dreams of so many, became the first spaceship built for regular passenger service to put humans into space.
Five, 3, 2, 1. Release, release, release. Fire, fire.
Good control. "55 seconds. 58 seconds. Motor shutdown. Mach 2.8.
Right motor burn, everybody. We're going to space, Richard.
264,000 feet. Welcome to space, Unity.
The view is incredible. Check that out, we can see Mexico.
Spaceship Unity, welcome to space.
Copy, base. $1 million view.
Apogee.
Virgin Galactic has shown that when you set off on challenging but important adventures, exceptional people come forward to join the journey. People who are consistently by your side and on your side. People who share your dreams and people who help make them reality.
Rolling to the right.
Complete.
As I watch Unity and her brave pilots soar upwards into space today, my vision blurred by tears, I could hear your great-granddad whisper once again in my ear. Life is indeed wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Stephen. Bueno, para terminar, antes de agradecerle a todos, quiero hacer solamente un pequeño comentario. Estamos hablando de viajes espaciales, pronto vamos a comer, va a sobrar una cantidad seguramente, espero, importante de comida. Y es importante que nos acordemos que en situaciones como estas, que no todo el mundo tiene el privilegio que tenemos los que estamos acá. Ahí afuera, justo del otro lado de esta pared, un stand de Redalco. Redalco es una red que conecta los desperdicios de alimentos que se tiran y que están en perfecto estado con gente que no tiene la posibilidad de comer regularmente como todos nosotros podemos. Los invito a que se acerquen a ese stand, que hablen con los chicos, que se interioricen y que busquen la manera de apoyar. Bueno, con esto damos por concluido el PuntaTech número 12. Queremos agradecer especialmente a todos los sponsors que nos apoyaron, a todos los que vinieron y sobre todo a nuestros socios de Lucero, donde están Carolina y Bruno, escondidas por ahí. Bueno.
Deben estar preparando la comida, por eso.
Cocinando.
Bueno, pero muchísimas gracias a todo el equipo de Lucero. La verdad que para nosotros es un placer saber que ya de entrada está todo asegurado. Así que el aplauso para...
Quiero agradecer a todo el equipo nuestro, que realmente este año son como 20, así que nada, admiración y gratitud y gracias a todos también.
Bueno, gracias a todos. Ahora a seguir haciendo networking y los esperamos para el PuntaTech 2021. Ya anunciaremos. Muchas gracias.